Welcome to Your Place on the River, a podcast brought to you by Carriage Key of Woodstock, Georgia, in partnership with Chattahoochee Nature Center. Our mission is to connect people with nature. As a private nonprofit 501c3 organization, CNC thrives thanks to support of our members, the community, and listeners like you. Discover more about Chattahoochee Nature Center at chatnaturecenter.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast. Tweet us at CNC Nature using the hashtag YPOTR. And here's your host, Melissa Carter.
I'm not sure there is anywhere in the metro Atlanta area that you can go without seeing one. Even when you drive on the interstate, when you fly into Hartsfield-Jackson Airport or whatever other airport you might fly into, there they are. When you walk out your front door, there they are. And when you look out the window, there they are. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about trees. There are so many different types of trees here in the metro Atlanta and Georgia area. And is it something you take for granted? Well, they're vital to your existence. These guys, don't take them for granted. They're Matt Hestad and John Mulcahy from the Georgia Forestry Foundation. So, John and Matt, I want to start with a story of my 10-year-old son because it was unique information we just discovered, but I'm sure y'all probably know this. So my son is in the 4th grade and he's been learning about space and he's been interested in space. And we, anytime I see little stories, whether it's Instagram or whether it's in the news, I will, having to do with space, I will clip it and we'll have a conversation. Well, several times in the past few weeks, we have clipped stories talking about, there's a planet that's all diamond and then diamonds this, diamond that. And then it was the conclusion that, people here on Earth tend to find that diamonds are this rich and wonderful thing, which it is, but it's prevalent in space, apparently. And it was saying that one of the things that doesn't seem to be prevalent in space is wood. So it was a way for us to talk about how wood is something so far a very unique thing for Earth. And so my son has developed an appreciation for trees. And so I thought I'd start that conversation to talk about how, a lot of people, I think, not nature lovers, obviously, but even nature lovers, I don't know if they understand how precious wood is. And I don't know, for some reason that just really rung with me because I think we take forestry, wood, things we use wood for granted. So I'll start with Matt. Matt, what do you think about that?
I think having the pleasure of growing up in this sector, and starting my career in sort of forestry advocacy and education has really highlighted that fact for me. When you fly into Atlanta, it's very apparent that we are truthfully the city in the forest, but we really are the state in a forest. 22 million acres of privately owned forest in our state, more than any other state in the nation. And those trees are there because individuals, families decided to put that land in trees. And just to give an analogy, I think if you go other places, for instance, my brother lives in Lexington, Kentucky. When you fly into Lexington, Kentucky, it's very apparent the horse racing industry in Lexington, and you see those bluegrass pastures, and the only trees that you're seeing are, maybe some hardwoods that are, shade trees for those horses and for homes on those farms. And so I think understanding that our forests, especially in the southeastern United States, are here because someone has chosen to put that land in trees is an important thing to realize. Mm-hmm. And I think that once you understand that, it starts, the system of conservation starts to make a lot more sense.
Right. John, you, of course, you can comment on if I'm being a good parent to my son when it comes to teaching him about, trees and land and, but I know a lot of times on this podcast, we talk about animals. And so I'm glad that we're having this transition and also talk about how the Georgia Forestry Foundation has a partnership with the Chattahoochee Nature Center. So, John, I'll let you go.
Yeah, and I do want to respond to the conversation that you had with your son. Obviously, a smart boy, and I also love the connection between the diamonds and the forest, and kind of made me think about the value that forests provide to us here in the state and really us here in the world in terms of how they're used. I mean, our homes are made from trees from the moment that we're born. That first diaper that is put on, that absorbent material is made from trees. The school books are made from trees. Packaging that protects our food and goods in transit are made with trees. And it's been a resource that man has depended upon since the dawn of time. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about trees here in the U.S. is the renewability and the sustainability of our industry. If you go back 100 years to 1920, there are essentially the same acreage of trees and the same volume of trees standing today than there were 100 years ago. Over that same time, our population has tripled. Our GDP has increased by a factor of 7. And so we built all those houses, we diapered all those babies, we printed all those school books while maintaining the number of trees that we have, which is a testament to the landowners that own our forests and who take care of those forests and replant those forests because there are economic incentives for them to do so. I mean, we're not producing a lot of new diamonds, but we are, I guess we are now, artificial ones, but
right.
We have been producing new trees for a long time, and it's a very healthy industry and a very sustainable one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Matt, let's talk about that. A lot of times we'll hear in other places, not here in our state, which I'm sure it happens, but when, you see deforestation and we've heard that term before, and we've seen, especially back when the rainforests were top of mind and people were talking about them clearing the rainforest and the danger of that. And do you think people are as sensitive about the sustainability of trees and making sure that we keep that population alive? Or do you think that there could be, more education on that?
I'll always advocate for the fact that I think we do need more education on the subject. Today in Georgia, the Georgia Forestry Commission, which is the state-funded organization that is kind of in charge of protecting our forests from wildfire, pests, disease, things along those lines, they do a sustainability report every 3 years. And that report is given to the Georgia General Assembly as a part of their legislative session. Those legislators are able to review kind of total forested acres and threats to our forests. And the largest threat, and a lot of people are surprised about this, the biggest threat to our forests in this state is urbanization and kind of expansion of suburban communities across the state. Georgia is a great place to live. I'm very bullish on Georgia. I've grown up here. My family lives here. I can't imagine living in another state. And there's people moving here every day. And the fact is that pressure on rural land to be converted to non-forest uses is incredible. We are really at an inflection point in the U.S. South where I think people like myself, John, and others are starting to think about how do we educate policymakers and others on the importance of, rural land value and ensuring that landowners have the tools in their toolbox to keep their land in forest and maybe resist some of that temptation to cash out and, turn it into a development. It's interesting when you live in a city, I don't think people really think about, they may think about it for a moment, but when a forest is converted into a urban or suburban use, you may have that quick moment where you think, man, that all used to be trees. But as soon as the Walmart pops up or homes pop up or something else, you just kind of write it off as, well, that's the new use for that piece of property. But I don't think we really realize what that incremental impact across the state and across the U.S. South has on our forested acres overall.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's another aspect of education that's important to build too, and that is if you drive past a growing forest every day, you don't see the amount of growth that takes place because it's happening, incrementally. But then when you see a forest is harvested, it's a stark change. And so, the removal of trees is much more visible than the growth of trees is. And to Matt's point, I think the largest driver of forest change is alternative use of the land. And so if we have to look at that harvesting of wood as the incentive that landowner has to take care of that land, to thin it, to maintain it, and then finally to replant it after the harvest does take place. And so, there's, I think, just a visual problem that, people don't quite understand its role in the larger system over time.
Yeah. Well, I recently had a conversation with my brother, and we were raised by parents who were raised on farms, and they were big nature lovers and had an appreciation for all living things. And, we just had the conversation on how, we have forced nature to abide by our convenience, right? That humans tend to continue to want to be comfortable and more comfortable. And we're forcing, again, like you said, the forest and the animals within it to abide by us and to have to navigate around roads and have to navigate around, like you said, cutting down these trees in their homes. And so, talk a little bit about, is that part of the argument when you talk about legislation, is that aspect of it, or is it mainly just an economic thing that politicians tend to listen to or to react to?
I think everybody tends to appreciate the natural state of Georgia. I think it is it's part of the character of our state. I think when you start to see large developments come into a community that typically hasn't seen very much development, you will start to see some pushback along those lines. What I think we are really focused on at the foundation is understanding long-term what is going to be the market-based incentives that will keep forests as forests. We are looking at a number of things along those lines. One is understanding the full value of our forested landscape. So not only the timber values, but also what is the value that landowners are providing to carbon sequestration, to water quality and quantity, and even wildlife habitat. And understanding that management of that forest, sustainable management of that forest, is going to increase the values for not only timberland, but for carbon sequestration, for wildlife habitat, and for water quality and quantity. The best use for an acre of land in the southeastern United States is a well-managed forest. It delivers more values to our society that I think we could begin to kind of quantify. And I think we've tried to quantify that at GFF, but all of those ecosystem services that I talked about, plus just the fact that you're surrounded by nature when you drive up and down the road and look out your window and see forest instead of something else. And so I think we want to educate people on the importance of those market-based conditions that keep forest as forests. I'll make a real quick point along those lines. After Georgia was settled, all of the land was converted to, let's see if you guys remember your Georgia history.
Cotton
and tobacco. So all the trees that nearly, a lot of the research says about 85% of our forest was converted to non-forest agricultural uses. Those trees came back to the landscape after Dr. Charles Hurdy, another famous Georgian, created the craft paper process. And once we had the ability to extract value from those stems that were growing, landowners were given more of an incentive to plant those acres back into trees. And I think today landowner sentiment has changed, and a lot of landowners probably their top five forest values are the fact that they enjoy being in nature and seeing wildlife and recreating on that property. But the timberland value is definitely an important aspect of being able to continue owning, managing, paying taxes on that land into the future.
Yeah.
John, talk a little bit about how you. Go ahead.
I was going to talk. We were talking about education, and Matt was talking about the role that the state and GFC play through the legislative process. But he was also hinting about the role that nonprofits can play on that as well, as GFF is the nonprofit wing of the Georgia Forestry Association. I also, serve on the board of trustees of the Chattahoochee Nature Center. I've been on the board for the past 5 years, and their mission is to connect people with nature. And so they've got a beautiful 127-acre facility right there on the Chattahoochee River, and what they really tried to do is kind of build that connection with the river and with the other ecosystem services that it provide. And a key part of that mission is to build that education and that knowledge with our city's children. And so they've got really two kind of key programs that do that. One is a school program that happens during the school year, and I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 students between City of Roswell, City of Atlanta, Fulton County students come up and spend time on the river and learning it. And in fact, 18,000 of those students come from Title I schools, and oftentimes it's the first time that they've actually seen the river, despite only living miles from it. And so that school program is a key part, as is the other program, which is the summer camp program that's there, where kids will spend a week there in camp and again learn about the river, learn about the role and the importance of forests for the creation and maintenance of water and water quality, for the protection of the wildlife that rely upon the trees and the river. And so part of what CNC is trying to do is to raise that awareness, to build that knowledge through an education process. In this particular case, addressing kind of the children of our city, and it's a fantastic program, and it's one that we want to grow, which is kind of what has led to the latest capital campaign and some of the support that we're getting from GFF in terms of increasing the facilities to improve the capacity to bring more students to the center and to engage more campers. We could do that by building a concrete block and steel center, or we could do that by building on the mission and the feel and building that out of wood. And so there was a key partnership that came out between the Chattahoochee Nature Center and the Georgia Forestry Foundation around building with wood. And I think that is a good example of how we can work together to drive that. I know Matt was a key part of that decision and that support, and he could probably expand on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So for the last couple of years, the Georgia Forestry Foundation has been really focused on expanding awareness of a product called mass timber. So for generations, as we, built America, we built with wood. And if you've been into any old buildings, you've probably seen a really large, heavy timber beam that is maybe a structural element for a roof or beams that hold up the building. One of the things that has been interesting about the innovation in engineered wood has been the process of mass timber fabrication. So what it does is it takes dimensional lumber, like a 2x4, like you would find at Home Depot, for example, and uses that dimensional lumber with a layer of dimensional lumber, a layer of glue, another layer of dimensional lumber, a layer of glue, and then it's pressed. And when that process of pressing those layers of lumber together happens, the wood actually chemically bonds to itself, and it gives the piece, whether it's a panel or a beam, the same tensile strength, and in some aspects maybe a little stronger than steel and concrete. So when we're thinking about the built environment and the overwhelming contributions of the built environment to carbon emissions each year, really mass timber unlocks an opportunity for us to think really differently about the buildings that we go to work in, that we live in, or that we play in, like gymnasiums and athletics facilities. So about a year ago, we announced through a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and the Softwood Lumber Board, a mass timber accelerator. And that project was really designed to support project teams who have a project and they want to build out of mass timber, but maybe they don't quite understand the material, where they're going to source it, the cost associated with it, or how to communicate about the material that they're using. And so the Chattahoochee Nature Center applied to be a part of that accelerator project and was selected last year. And so we've been working with the project team to really understand how they can use mass timber in that new welcome center that they are building. And I think it's unlocked a lot of really creative ideas about how we welcome campers and visitors to the river. I think Natasha says it really well when she says that this new building is really a lot of people's first introduction to the Chattahoochee River. So building something that kind of helps us tell a story about natural environments, but also functionally operates as a space that people want to be in, is a unique opportunity, and we're really proud to be partnered with you all on that project.
Well, and the thing is too, when you talk about the strength of the wood and the binding in itself, and I don't know if a lot of people would have associated you can make wood actually stronger than the concrete. But as you were speaking, I think of all the historic buildings, especially that I've been to, not only around here, but on vacations and stuff. And when it's wood, it is just, you have more of a connection to it. I don't know. I mean, Matt, John, do you agree that the response to something made of wood is different than the response of something made of concrete? Like I don't know. It just, it seems more of a connection to it.
100%. And actually, there's a term for it, which is biophilia. And so it's this connection that people have when they interact with nature, and it just kind of changes their mood. And I think it can relax people. And I think it's an important component to kind of building in general, but even more so when you're thinking about building a nature center. To Matt's point, it is oftentimes part of people's first interaction with the river and with the forest. And the nature center itself is just a beautiful wooded area with a nice combination of hardwoods and softwoods, and there's nesting birds that are in the trees, and it wouldn't make sense to make it out of anything else for a structure like that. And it does help to create the connection, and also help to demonstrate that nature does provide a lot of what we call ecosystem services, some of which are provisioning services, which are to provide the food and the materials that we need to advance our society, but also to clean our air, clean our water, sequester carbon, all of those types of things. And so it really helps to broaden the understanding of the role that forests and trees have in our society.
Yeah. Before I let y'all go, first, Matt, how can people find out more about the Forestry Foundation if they were interested in what you do and again, the grants that you offer?
As always, you can find out more information about us on GFF, as in Georgia Forestry Foundation, grow.org. We are also on, I think, every social media channel that's available. If you just search for our name, you can feel free to message us on any of those applications. Our staff's pretty responsive to those requests. And, we're always out and about in the community as well. Coming up, actually, I don't know when this podcast will come out, but on April 26th, we will be with our friends at CNC at Ponce City Market for our Earth Day party. We have a little space off of the Beltline there, right as you're coming into Ponce City Market, where we get together with our friends in conservation, and we have free T-shirts and other information and literature about everything that we do as an organization. So happy to connect either virtually or in person.
Well, I wanted to make sure that people understood that. Before I ask both of you this question, before we leave, you talk about CNC and the advocacy for kids to learn more about nature and to kind of indoctrinate. I know that tends to be a negative word in some connotations, but you're basically just making sure that, young people understand their connection to nature. And so I appreciate their dedication to that. But I want your stories. The first thing you think about when did you start loving nature? Because I was thinking about trees as you were speaking, and when I was a kid, I was the youngest. I was the oops baby. So I had to play games by myself because my teenage siblings weren't interested. And sometimes though, it was always outside and it was always in nature. And then I got to the point where when the wind blew, I always felt like the trees were waving at me, as if they were people and friends. And so I, even today, when the wind blows, I think the same thing. So is there a story that I'll start with Matt and then I'll go to John that made you fall in love with nature when you were a kid?
I always appreciate talking about this because I think it means a lot to me. So I grew up on a farm. My dad was a horse trainer and a rancher. And so we had cattle, horses, and I didn't really spend a whole lot of time inside as a kid. I spend probably more time inside now than I ever did growing up. My childhood was really spent on horseback, working outside, gathering up cattle who typically would get out and go find some shade in a forest somewhere, which turned out to be kind of interesting in some situations. So, but I loved it. Everything about being outside, being in nature, being around animals, being connected to the dirt is an important part of who I am. The values that I have, the values that I think my family continues to have is all connected back to the dirt. So,
John, what about you?
Yeah, that's a great story. And I grew up in kind of rural New Jersey, and our house backed up to a wooded area, and you could just walk back forever and not run into any development and have a lot of good memories from playing back there as a young child. But I would say the connection really began to hit home once I started my career. So I work for Georgia Pacific, which is a forest products company based here in Atlanta, and I have for my entire career, so 38 years with the company. And when I started knowing that it was a forest products company, I started asking myself and then asking folks in the company a lot of questions about, is it okay that we're using trees, and learning more about the forestry practices and that sort of thing. And so it was about wanting to make sure that I was working for a company that was responsible, working for a company that was valuing and taking care of resources. And that kind of led me on a path to eventually be responsible for our overall sustainability program. Just that natural kind of curiosity and wanting to ensure that our company was being a good steward of the resources that we depend upon to make the products that satisfy those needs in society, and we are. And so it's been a kind of a 38-year journey so far, and still going.
Well, I like how you use good steward, right? So thank you guys both for being part of the podcast and being good stewards for nature and for trees and for making sure that humans don't forget their connection as being part of nature that sometimes we do. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Your Place on the River, brought to you by Carriage Key of Woodstock, Georgia, in partnership with Chattahoochee Nature Center. Remember to like and subscribe to Your Place on the River wherever you get your podcast. Visit chatnaturecenter.org to stay updated on all happenings at the Nature Center.